This is the Spoken English Bible.
God's Word spoken
For you. Now, during the time when the tribal leaders were ruling the country of Israel, there was a man named Elimelech. He had a wife named Naomi, which means joy, and they had two sons named Mahlon and Chilion. They lived in the town of Bethlehem in the region of Judah, and they were descended from one of the founding families of Bethlehem. But a famine hit that area, and there wasn't enough food. So Elimelech and his family moved to the nearby country of Moab, to the farmland there. And then Joy's husband, Elimelech, died. She was left all alone with her two sons. The two sons married Moabite women. One was named Orpah and the other was named Ruth. And they lived there for about 10 years. And then those two sons also died. And Joy was left all alone, a woman with no husband and no sons. Now, while she was there in Moab, she heard that the famine was over in her country because Yahweh had taken care of his people. There was food again in Bethlehem. So she decided to go back home. So she set out from Moab to go back to Judah, and her two daughters-in-law came with her. And while they were there on the road back to Judah, Joy said to them, "My dears, go back home to your mother's houses. Find new husbands. Find peace and rest and security in the homes of those new husbands. And this is the blessing I hereby give you both. Yahweh will be loyal to you, just like you've been loyal to me and to my sons. And he will provide for you. Go home." She kissed them goodbye. They all hugged and cried like their hearts were breaking. And Ruth and Orpah said, No, we're going back with you. We're going back with you to your people." But Joy told them, "No, why would you do that? Why would you go back with me? Do you think I could still have sons for you to marry? No, I'm too old to get married. And even if I met someone today and I got married right away and I got pregnant tonight with sons, would you really wait around for them to grow up so you could marry them? No. My life is miserable, and it is so much worse than yours because Yahweh is working against me. Go home." They all hugged again, and they cried like their hearts were breaking. And Orpah kissed Joy goodbye, and she went back. But Ruth threw her arms around her mother-in-law and wouldn't leave. And Joy told her, "Look, your sister-in-law is going back to her people and to her gods. Go with her." But Ruth told her, No, stop trying to make me leave you. I'm not going to abandon you. Wherever you go, I'll go. Wherever you stay, I'll stay. Your people are my people, and your God is my God. Wherever you die is where I will die, and wherever you're buried is where I will be buried. And with Yahweh as my witness, I now put myself under a curse. If anything separates us, even after we're both dead, Yahweh himself will punish me." Well, when Joy saw that her mind was made up, she stopped trying to convince her to leave, and the two of them went back to Bethlehem. And when they got there, the whole town was just buzzing because of the two of them, and all of the women of the town were saying, "Is this really Joy? Could this really be Joy?" But Joy told them, "Don't call me that. Why would you call me Joy, Naomi? Call me Mara, miserable, because the all-powerful one has made my life miserable. When I left here, I had everything. And Yahweh has brought me back here with nothing. Why would you call me joy? Yahweh, the all-powerful one, has judged me and is punishing me.
Joy came back from the farmland in Moab with her daughter-in-law, Ruth the Moabite. And they got back to Bethlehem around the time of year when people were starting to harvest barley. Now there was a man in Bethlehem whose name was Boaz. He was one of Elimelech's relatives, and he was powerful and influential and wealthy. And he was a good man. One day, Ruth the Moabite went to her mother-in-law and said, "If I went into the field of some kind person who will be generous enough to let me pick up the leftover grain, would that be all right with you?" Her mother-in-law said, "Oh, yes, of course. Go ahead, my dear." So Ruth went out. She went down to the field and started picking up the leftover grain. And it just so happened that this field belonged to Boaz, Elimelech's relative. And then it just so happened that Boaz came out of Bethlehem and came down to his field. And he greeted his servants who were working in the field and said, "Good morning. May Yahweh be with you." His servants responded and said, "Good morning. May Yahweh be good to you." And then Boaz went up to the harvest supervisor and said, "Who's that woman over there? Who's her family?" The supervisor said, "She's a Moabite, the one who came back with joy from Moab. She came up to me and she asked if she could gather up the leftover grain from where the servants were leaving the bundles in the field. And she has been there from that time in the morning until now. She's only rested a little bit in the shelter." Then Boaz went up to Ruth and said, "Hey, you don't need to work in any other field. Just stay right here in this one. You see the women over there? Follow them, work over there. I have already told the men they are not to mess with you. And if you get thirsty, you can go get a drink of water from the jugs that the men have filled up." Ruth bowed down to show him respect and said, "Sir, why are you being so generous? I'm a stranger, and you're treating me like family." And Boaz said, "I have heard about everything you've done for your mother-in-law after your husband died. How you left your family and your homeland, and you came to a country where you didn't know anyone. May Israel's God, Yahweh, reward you and repay you for everything you've done because you've put yourself under his protection." Ruth said, "Thank you, sir, for being so generous. You've comforted me and you've put my mind at ease, and I'm not even going to become like one of your servants." Later, at mealtime, Boaz called Ruth over and said, "Come over here. Take some of that bread and dip it in that sauce." And then he got some roasted grain and gave that to her to eat too. So she sat down next to his servants and she ate until she was full. And then she saved some for later and went back to work. And then Boaz talked to his servants and said, "Look, she is going to be gathering grain from between the bundles, and you will not mess with her, and you will not do anything to make her feel embarrassed about that. And you're not just going to do that. You're also going to pull out some of the grain from the bundles and leave it there for her to gather. And you will not do anything to criticize her." So Ruth gathered up the grain until it was evening. And then she took it and beat it to separate the kernels from the husks. And then she gathered up all that grain and went back to the city. And it was about 5 gallons of barley that she'd gathered. So Ruth showed this to her mother-in-law, and she also gave her the leftover food. And her mother-in-law said, "Where did you work today? What happened? May whoever treated you so well receive good things in return." So Ruth told her about everything that happened, and she said, "The man's name was Boaz." Her mother-in-law said, "Oh, May Yahweh reward him because he hasn't forgotten to be loyal to us or to our husbands who have already died. This man is one of our closest relatives, which means he's one of our family restorers who's responsible for taking care of us." And Ruth said, "Oh, well, he also told me to stay with his servants until they finish harvesting all of the grain." And her mother-in-law said, "Oh, yes, good. Yes, stay with the women who work for him, and that way the men in other fields won't bother you." And that's what Ruth did. Ruth picked up leftover grain in Boaz's field alongside the women who worked for him for the entire barley harvest and the entire wheat harvest. And she continued living with her mother-in-law. One day, her mother-in-law, Joy, said to her, "My dear, it's time for me to find you a permanent home, somewhere that's safe and secure and where you'll be provided for. You know Boaz, the man whose women you've been working with? Well, he is one of our closest relatives. And tonight, he and his men are going to be working separating the grain from the husks. So here's what you're going to do. Go take a bath, put on some nice perfume, put on your best clothes, and then go down to where they're working. But don't let Boaz see you until after he's finished eating and drinking. But pay attention so that you know where he lies down. And then go and take his cloak from off of his feet and lie down beside him. And he will tell you what to do next." And Ruth said, "Oh, okay, I will do that." And so Ruth went down to where Boaz and his men were working, and she did everything that her mother-in-law said. And Boaz ate and drank, and he was feeling pretty good, and so he went down to the far end of the barley pile and laid down on the ground and fell asleep. And then Ruth crept in, and she took his cloak from off of his feet and laid down beside him. And then around midnight, the man woke up all of a sudden, and he reached out, and there was a woman right there by his feet. And he said, "Who are you?" And she said, "I'm Ruth, your woman. You are our family restorer, so please put me under your protection." And he said, "Oh, wow. May Yahweh reward you, because the family loyalty you're showing now is even better than what you've already done. Because you haven't gone chasing after any of the younger men in their prime, whether they're rich or poor. So don't worry. I am going to do everything that you have asked me to do, because all of the decision makers in our family know that you are a woman with a lot of integrity. But even though I am a family restorer, I'm not the primary family restorer. There is another relative who's more closely related to you than I am. He really should be the one to take care of you. So spend the night here. And tomorrow, if he agrees to step up and do it, great. But if not, with Yahweh as my witness, I promise I will take care of you. So spend the night here." And that's what she did. And then she woke up early in the morning before it was light enough to recognize anybody. And he was like, "Oh, I gotta make sure no one knows this woman came here tonight." And then he told her, "Hold out your shawl." And he poured 6 scoops of barley into her shawl, bundled it up, and put it on her shoulders. And she went back home to her mother-in-law, and he went into the city. And when she got home, her mother-in-law asked, "So, how'd it go?" And she explained everything that the man had said and done, and she showed her the barley, and she said, "He even gave me these 6 scoops of barley because he was like, don't go back home to your mother-in-law empty-handed." And her mother-in-law said, "Okay, good. Now just sit and wait until we hear how this turns out, because this man's not going to take a break. He is going to get it all settled today." Boaz went up to the city gate where people hung out and did business, and he sat down and waited. And it just so happened that along came that family restorer he'd been talking about, Mr. What's-his-name. And Boaz said to him, "Come and sit down over here for a minute." The family restorer came and sat down. And then Boaz went and got 10 of the town elders and said, "Come and join us over here." And they came and sat down. And then Boaz said to the family restorer, "So you know that land that belonged to a relative Elimelech? Well, his widow Joy, who just came back from Moab, is looking to sell it. And I thought I would let you know about it, in case you wanted to buy it and restore it to the family. If you did, you could do that right now, right here in front of all of the witnesses and the elders who are sitting here. If you don't, just let me know, because you're first in line and I'm next." Family restorer said, "Yes, I will do that." Boaz said, "And also, when you agree to buy and take responsibility for the land from Joy and from Mahlon's widow Ruth, the Moabite, you also agree to marry Ruth, to have a son with her to carry on the family line." The family restorer said, "Oh, no, I can't do that. That would mess up my own inheritance. You go ahead and you restore the land to the family and take over my responsibilities for it, because I can't do that." So around this time in Israel, when people were discussing land transfers and the responsibilities of the family restorer, when they wanted to make the deal official, one of them would take off his sandal and pass it to the other one, and that's what finalized the deal. So the family restorer said, "You go ahead and take over my responsibilities for the land and the family, because I can't do that." And he took off his sandal. And then Boaz said to the elders and to all of the members of the extended family who were there, "You all are witnesses today that I hereby buy and take responsibility for everything that belonged to Elimelech and to Mahlon and Chilion, which Joy currently has. I also hereby agree to marry Mahlon's widow Ruth, to have a son with her, to carry on the family line, so that the land stays in the family and so that they don't lose their place on the family tree or their spot on the family council. You all are witnesses today." All the people who were there at the gate and the elders said, "Yes, we are witnesses. Do what's right in the region of Ephrathah and maintain the family's reputation in the town of Bethlehem. And now this is the blessing we hereby give you. Yahweh will make it so that your new wife will have children, and she will be like the wives of our ancestor Israel, Rachel and Leah, who are the mothers of our nation. Yahweh will give you a son through this woman, and he will make that son's household as large and prosperous as the household of our ancestor Perez, the son of Tamar and Judah." So Boaz married Ruth, and they slept together. And Yahweh made it so that she got pregnant, and she had a baby boy. And all of the women in the town told Joy, "Isn't Yahweh wonderful? He's given you a son to carry on the family line. He'll be your family restorer, and he will be famous throughout all Israel. He'll give you back your life, and he'll take care of you when you're old. And he will do all of this because he is the son of your daughter-in-law, and she loves you, and she is worth more than 7 sons." Joy picked up the baby, and she snuggled him, and she became a second mother to him. And all the women in Bethlehem spread the news everywhere that Joy had a son. The women named him Obed. Obed was the father of Jesse, and Jesse was the father of King David. This is the family tree of King David's ancestor Perez. Perez had a son named Hezron, who had a son named Ram. Ram had a son named Amminadab, who had a son named Nahshon. Nahshon had a son named Salma, who was the father of Boaz. Boaz was the father of Obed. Obed was the father of Jesse, and Jesse was the father of David, the king.
You've been listening to the Spoken English Bible. Please like, subscribe, and let us see your comments on what's encouraged you from this passage. To experience more passages like this, check out our playlist. To listen to this ad-free and to hear our full translation commentary, go to akuobible.org or download the Akuo app today.